what I would like is for everybody to go around and just give an introduction to themselves, who you are, and what your involvement in climate change activism is. Anyone would like to take the lead?
Sure, I'm happy to start. My name is Ram Sagor Kagram, and I'm a film producer based in Los Angeles. I originally began my career at NYU Tisch School of the Arts in film and television production before making the leap out to Los Angeles. I produced my first feature over the last few years, and I'm now involved on 3 feature films that are all slated to be released in 2025. I'm now launching a production company focused on transnational stories with other young producers and creatives to imbue the cultural conversation with the right globally conscious philosophy for the future, transnational stories by the next generation, or the next generation of which climate, sustainability, and biodiversity are the top priority.
Excellent, thank you. Cal?
Hi, my name is Kalyan Fernand. I'm a computer science student with a political science minor here at Chapman University in Southern California. My involvement here is I just think it's really important for students and young people to get in a room and really discuss climate policy, specifically how universities are taking an approach to being more environmentally conscious and what they could do more on. So I'm thrilled to be here. Want to thank Anand so much for having me, and I'm excited to get started.
Thank you. Euro.
Hi, everyone. I'm a future doctor. I'm currently pursuing my bachelor degree in science in University of Toronto. I totally agree, and I think these kind of discussions are a basic, one of the most basis for us as a young futurist. So really happy to be a part of this futuristic discussion. I think it's going to be great.
Thank you. And if you could just introduce yourself with your full name, that'd be great.
Oh, sorry. I'm Yura Petrosyan.
Thank you. Jai?
Hi, I'm Jay Singh. I'm a student at, it's all good. A student at UC Merced. And yeah, I think it's really important to have these kind of discussions, kind of open the student's mind to kind of climate activism. And it's important to start now. Like most people don't really start thinking about it in university, and I think it's important to start thinking about it very early so we can make the most impact as a generation.
Excellent. Thank you, Jay. And I hope I'm going to pronounce Kaina's name correctly.
Yeah, you did. I'm Kaina. I am clearly the only school student here. I study in grade 11. I'm from India. And I think that these kind of discussions are really important because honestly, it's a perspective on the table. And it's a very more the merrier situation for me, at least when it comes to diverse perspectives and thoughts and opinions. Really excited to be here.
Thank you very much. So to kick off, what we know for students, there are many issues that can take up your time, your attention, and things that you become passionate about and can see ways to change the world for the better. For each of you, what specifically, was there an incident? Was it someone in your circle, family, an academic role model? Who motivated or what motivated you to become actively involved or become a climate change activist? Ram?
Yeah, I'm happy to start there. I grew up in Seattle, Washington, which is an extremely eco-conscious city as far as they go, and then had the pleasure of going to university in a similarly minded global city. For young people growing up, around me at least, this was kind of omnipresent and certainly bolstered by my parents who are academics. But it really was just a part of the culture where I was growing up. I remember attending a lot of walkouts and protests, even in my early teenage years, regarding climate. And that has only increased over the years as I've entered the professional world.
Very good. Cal?
Okay. So I'd say I've been politically involved and very interested in policy surrounding climate for quite a while. Politics has always been a big interest of mine, and how we implement policy has always been a very big deal for me. So I saw it on the news, and I was always kind of interested in what we could do to protect our planet. Where it became real for me, however, were the the wildfires. I don't remember which year exactly it was, but I can remember that I was in 9th grade, and I remember the air quality being absolutely terrible. I remember the fires literally coming up to our doorstep, as we live a bit on the outskirts of LA, the hills behind our house being absolutely burnt and charred. And at that moment, I was like, I had understood that it was real, and I had understood that it was something that we had to mitigate. But in that moment, to me personally, it became real. And that moment sparked my interest in really pursuing this. And yeah.
I remember, no, I completely remember that time. My views when I would look out, it was apocalyptic. It didn't, it was like you're looking at something from the movies and it's right in front of us.
And it was absolute madness. And I think the reaction in that time, where there were still people around me who denied that this had anything to do with climate change, that further sparked my interest in the topic. And how do we bring this message to people in a way that they can see it? Because if it's even happening around them, and they're denying it, what can we do? And I'm seeing that a lot as well. My parents moved to Georgia, and as y'all know, Georgia and Florida got hit by a massive hurricane. And I think it's very interesting because I feel as though there's a bit of a cognitive disconnect in terms of what's going on around us and how we see the world. So I think because of that, it's really important to have these kind of discussions and bring the facts to the people.
Thank you, Cal. Euro.
Yeah, so I think for me it was in high school. As I got selected, I was raised in Armenia, so in Armenia I got selected as a to be a participant in an international chemistry Olympiad, 2 international chemistry Olympiads, and I think that was the point that when I started to, I was very interested in life sciences and mathematical sciences. So when I started diving deep into the reasons of science reasons why climate change is happening, what is the science behind it, that's what I think that was the pivotal point for me, to when I got to understand what is the real science reasons behind those changes.
Excellent, thank you. And Jay.
Right. Yeah, so coming to actually UC Merced, I had a very interesting conversation with one of the professors here. His name is Professor Bradman, and what he was doing at the time, and he's still doing, is he's doing some research on actually air quality. So he has a system of air quality sensors all around, mostly the Central Valley, which kind of report the just the general temperature in that area. Whereas it's a very non-specific, like on the weather app, it's very non-specific what the temperature is. And what his research is doing is it's basically kind of localizing that temperature reading. So it's much better for weather prediction and kind of forecasting like temperatures. So it's a wide range of use. And that really inspired me to kind of get a little bit more into climate activism.
Very good, thank you. And Kaina.
For me, it was a personal experience very similar to Cal's, except it was a water crisis. So my school is in it's at a hill station, and basically every like place except for our school around us had a major water crisis. It was a day zero sort of a situation. So we went out and we tried our best to get the resources done and just make it work for the people around us, but it didn't, and it resulted with a lot of people being admitted to hospitals and just a whole lot of hold up in the water supply. So I think that's what really sparked my interest in all this, just watching all of that happen.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch it. So you were trying to take some measures to help people, and those measures didn't.
Yeah, they didn't work as efficiently as one would, have needed at that point.
What was it that you were doing?
We were trying to coordinate with the surrounding areas the basically the municipalities of the surrounding areas to be able to, you know, coordinate for more water supplies. And we were also trying to make sure we save up from our school itself. So it's a boarding school, so it's a residential community. So we were just trying to make sure that we save up from there. This was, I think, 2-3 years ago. We were just trying to make sure we save up from there, but it did not quite have the impact that, you know, it would have needed.
Thank you very much for sharing. So what you've all now been doing, you've given a fantastic introduction to what motivated you to get involved. Since you've started, can you give insights into, I mean, kind of there you gave one that was at the very beginning of your involvement, but what insights can you share with the work and effort that you've committed to since beginning your activism? And we'll go back again to Ram.
Thank you. You know, for me, I think Kumi Naidu spoke a little bit about artivism the other day, and visual media, film in particular, has always represented an invaluable means by which people from vastly different places, backgrounds, and histories can really connect with each other and empathize with each other. And so the hope for my production company moving forward is that Terra will be able to draw from incredibly talented voices all over the world to weave a nuanced and informed vision for what the future may hold in a time of increasing division, despite the fact that these are such transnational problems. I mean, I think just now Cal and Kaina both described a very similar circumstance happening in two places extremely far away from each other, but that are effectively part of the same problem. And so hopefully that kind of transnational storytelling will galvanize you know, a more globally conscientious approach to all of this, which will ultimately advocate that we're all better off together tackling this together.
Can you share, so have you produced content already that's been shared widely?
We have 3 films that are actually about to come out in 2025. Each of these kinds of projects have very long timelines, but the hope is that with this kind of a company, we'll be able to actually continue to expand in scope and make this just a part of what we see as commercial storytelling in general, because I do think part of the issue here is a deep apathy that we're combating, and also a real sense of futility for our generation. And I think these kinds of stories, and particularly this kind of philosophy imbued across the board in all kinds of storytelling, but particularly film and television, which is easily the most accessible in my opinion, we're hoping that this will become a consistent practice and will be a part of that shift.
What are the names of the films that we should be looking out for?
In the beginning of next year, Concessions, which is about the death of movie theaters, will be coming out. We also have a Korean American coming of age story that takes place both in Boston and in Seoul. And then the last is a Spanish language film called Verde, which is perhaps the most climate conscious of the 3, and is actually about 3 young men in the Jabón in the Dominican Republic who actually rob a mine near their village and actually have to face the consequences of that.
Well, good luck with those films.
Thank you.
Cal?
Yeah, so what my biggest lesson since I've gotten started with this has been more or less you have to meet people where they're at. You need to sit down with people, you need to talk to people, you need to make those connections and truly make them understand the scope of the issue. And even if you don't agree and you don't come to the same conclusion, it's very important to have that dialogue and not be stuck in your own kind of bubble and not let people around you be stuck in their kind of bubble. And to be able to have that overlap and have these conversations and really just kind of, you know, share these different perspectives so that people can be exposed to perspectives that they may not have known about. Now, I could not agree more with Ram in terms of the importance of media and film and kind of shaping these perspectives. But I also think it comes down to just the sharing of information. Like right now, I'm on a project with a good friend and colleague of mine, Daniel Franks, where we're currently mapping all of California's climate zones and looking at different risk factors. And then mapping these to the most effective and least damaging wildfire retardants so that people can see exactly what is being used to put out the wildfires in their area. So not only is this a good tool for firefighters who in a pinch are going to be able to choose the wildfire retardant a lot quicker and more effectively. But it's going to be something that the public can use to basically gauge the environmental impacts of the response around them. So I really think it does come down to information, and a good part of that information is messaging, like Ram was saying. But I do believe that the ease of access of data and just pure data without a spin on it is also very crucial to this so that people can see the numbers with their own eyes.
Very good. Love that. Euro?
Yeah, so I think one of the issues here is that most of the people do not quite understand that little changes make up the big change. So I really like to look at this as a type of a chain reaction, because if you do a small change, then it causes another small change. That small causes another small change, and at the end of the day, this becomes this big chain that has already a great impact. So just starting using a glass bottle instead of plastic bottles. With this little change, you can motivate other people to use glass bottles instead of plastic bottles. And this becomes this big change. And one of my activities is I have founded a group of young futurists from all around the world, which is called MIF, Mirror in the Future. And we're writing a book about foresight and how we can predict our future and how we can influence climate together and envisioning future that we want to see. And we cope with questions like how to do it, why, and what are the reasons. By gathering young futurists together and thinking about that and actually coming up with solutions is one of the key factors here.
Are there any solutions that came up that impressed you the most or inspired you?
So the way we decided, currently we're writing a book. We have also a TED Talk about that as well. In our book, we're trying to look at the question with two different sides, from utopian perspective, from dystopian perspective, and normotopian perspective. From dystopian perspective, we're trying to envision what we do not want to see. This is the worst case scenario. Let's avoid this. From utopian perspective, we want that to be in a very far future. And the normotopian perspective is the realistic prognosis of what we'll see and actual steps we have to take in order to get there. So, and those bright futures, young futures are from all around the world. And that's what makes it, again, diversity and different perspectives on the single thing makes it just an amazing discussion. And one of the key factors to the solution.
Excellent. Thank you. Jay?
Yeah, so I think education is a big part of it also. I've done some work in conservation projects kind of over the course of the past few years, and I've taken from that like these little changes can make a big difference. Like on one of the projects, it was cleaning up crawfish at in a local river, and it actually changed the entire thing. So that river had become overrun with crawfish, and us cleaning it up actually helped that environment to bounce back to its natural state. And I think that's very important because it kind of shows the impact that just a few people can have on the general impact. So, I mean, some of the things are like just carpooling, like the act of carpooling, it can reduce carbon emissions by a whole lot. And it's just like little things that just make that huge difference. And I think that a lot of people just don't know that the impact that they can have on the world is very large. And yeah.
Great. And in terms of the things that you've been doing, can you give us some insights into sort of the work that you put in, the effort that you're putting into this?
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, I was part of a group, National League of Young Men. So basically that was kind of a organization where me and a bunch of peers were kind of giving back to the community, but also in that, we're participating in a lot of conservation projects, like just like local stuff, trash cleanup and things like that. And then other stuff I've done is Boy Scouts, and we did a lot of conservation work there too. And it's yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Kind of.
Yeah. So I think that to be able to drive change, you've got to start at the grassroots level. I think a shift in the job market would really do it. A shift in the kind of jobs we look at, to move away from traditional sectors to move into more sustainable jobs, not sustainable in the sense where we're looking at environmentally sustainable, but sustainable in the long term. This would also cater to environment and the climate, especially. Um, I think that most people do not know that jobs like this exist, and that is where we need to start. Um, Initiatives that I have been a part of. So within the school community, actually, we have an incinerator. So all the old books would generally just go to the incinerator. But a few of us started this project, and where what we do is, it's actually a huge team. We would recycle the books and make them into reusable notepads. So on one side, you'd have a used like printed sheet, and then on the other, you'd be able to write. It'd be an empty sheet. So you just move it along. And I think we ended up using around 200 or 400 old books around that range. And yeah, I think it was a really successful project.
Very good. Thank you for sharing. Ram, what have you, since you've been involved, learned that maybe has surprised or even shocked you the most, that you wish more people knew about, that you would share more widely?
I just want to correct, it's Ram. And
Yeah.
I think, I just mentioned, and many people throughout the conference have mentioned that awareness for the issue among young people is at an all-time high. But I also think it's really important to address those feelings of futility and understanding the scope of the problem. I think it is very easy to feel overwhelmed about it. And that general feeling of anxiety kind of permeates. What I would really like people to be aware of is that the activists and advocates that I see currently succeeding the most, who are actually perhaps having the most outsized impact beyond just the personal little things that we can all do every day, are the folks who are really trying to embrace this philosophy in all aspects of their careers, and really trying to be the change that they'd like to see in the world, be it in arts and culture like myself, getting involved in governance and policymaking, or even careers in the financial world, in bringing and embodying these beliefs into our careers for young people and prioritizing biodiversity, sustainability, climate action. What former President Obama referred to as the last generation who can perhaps combat catastrophic climate change effectively, should ideally be supported by older generations to implement solutions that for us are not divisive at all and actually really represent popular ideas. The hope is that as we continue to get older, this number, which as I understand is roughly 2/3 of all millennials and Gen Z, who believe that this should be the top priority to ensure a positive future for ourselves and for future generations, to really be given the tools and access perhaps earlier, so that we can begin to implement this systemically, in addition to all of the small scale work that's being done.
Do you feel right now that the collaboration, I guess, between different generations, and particularly the older, more established generations with the youth communities, is there enough interaction, collaboration there? Do you feel that you get the level of support you need?
Unfortunately, I don't. I think that this is something we're working on. I think conferences like this are incredible for it. I think giving young people platforms and resources, but also attention, is what's key. And this obviously is something that will change over time. But if we can accelerate it and bring young voices to the forefront of those conversations where real decisions are happening, I have, without a doubt, I think that this stuff will begin to change much more quickly.
Great, thank you. Cal? And sorry, if I mispronounce anyone's name, please do correct me.
No worries at all, no worries.
Ram and Cal, am I doing okay with Cal?
Yeah, we are good. I would say the most interesting thing, or the most shocking thing that I learned about this issue since I've started is really the history of this issue, right? Like from the ozone layer and how the country was able and the world was able to come together and really solve that issue to where we are now. And I'm just going to briefly touch on this, but the fact of the matter is, while I agree with Jay and Yura's points that the individual can make a difference and a huge difference, right? And the idea of the domino effect. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have my reusable water bottle right here and I drive my electric car to class, right? So I fully endorse that idea, and that's a value that I've been very strongly brought up with in my family. What shocked me in terms of the issue was kind of the PR move that the oil and gas industry made to shift blame away from themselves and towards the individual throughout the 90s and early 2000s. So I guess my question, and I'm going to turn this around and make this a question to the rest of the panelists right here, is how do we make sure that the individual can continue to contribute positively towards reducing their carbon footprint and being more ecologically conscious while not forgetting the big picture fact that we have to hold these companies responsible as well? Because I feel that that's a part of the issue that has not been talked about enough.
Is there anyone on the panel that would like to respond to Cal? Is there anything that you feel could be done more to hold companies accountable for their actions?
I'm happy to take a swing at this, at least very briefly, because I do think that there, particularly in our generation, is an unwillingness to work with some of these companies that perhaps have been the biggest contributors to this global problem. But I do think, in fact, that it is crucial that we engage with some of these massive transnational organizations to continue to inspire the change that we're now seeing, and really try to find a way to motivate them, by the means in which they're already inherently motivated, capital and whatever else, to continue to change their business models, to adjust policy standards, and so on and so forth, and really not box them out of the conversation, because I think that creates a deep animosity between big energy and activists, when in fact it is one shared problem. And they have a responsibility to also contribute to the solutions.
Absolutely. And obviously, as you say, rightfully say, being collaborative, working together is the ideal, the way forward. And so long as they are all willing participants, then hopefully we'll eventually get there. Yura, do you have anything to share with what you found most surprising, most shocking?
Sure. So reflecting on both questions, actually, I would say let's just gather a bunch of elementary school students and ask them, what do you like to do? What do you want to become? And you'll find bright minds with a lot of painters. There are going to be a lot of architectures, a lot of scientists, a lot of people who know their singers, a lot of musicians. And now let's gather a bunch of 30 or 40-year-olds and ask them the same question. It's going to be this very gray, they're going to start complaining about their bills. You're going to encounter this gray environment. And getting back to the question, what I think is important is to involve, and the decision making involve kids and young futurists, because with age, people tend to lose that color, I would say, that spark. And sometimes curiosity is just all it takes. It's just to be curious. And sometimes young people, especially kids, come up with such genius solutions that a bunch of specialists and professionals would not be able to come up with throughout the whole research process. And how to embrace that is to make sure that they feel included, and that show them that they can have a change, that small change can influence and motivate a whole bunch of people. And that's why I think those kind of discussions, this discussion we're having, and I've watched other panels as well, how 12-year-olds, 10-year-olds are just having this bright, amazing ideas, is to make sure we use them because they come up with out of the box ideas that I think just maybe older people cannot come up with due to just losing their colors. So yeah, making sure that they're included and using their ideas is the key. Because I mean, we are going to build the future. I mean, we are the future. So making sure that they're involved is the key.
I fully agree with that, but hoping not so much on the lack of color on my side. And
because one of the things as a myth mirror in the future we have done is to interview a lot of people to get to just see what they're thinking. And one of the findings is they're really dystopic. A lot of people, and we're asked about climate, oh, we're gonna lose the battle. I mean, let's just live right now, and those are very negative ideas most of the time, which is shocking. Even sometimes young people as well. This is a new trend to be negative. Most of the time, the answers were really negative, and maybe this is concerning as well. Because when we asked about the future, most of the responses we got were dystopic. They're matching the dystopia part because as we have asked the 20-year-old about the future of climate change, it's we're not gonna make a change. Come on, are you kidding me? Most of the answers were some sort of like this. So this is an issue we have to address as well.
got it. Thank you very much. Jay.
Yeah, so something that surprised me was yeah, the lack of awareness on like topics such as global warming. Um, just kind of going around talking to people, it seems like it's not taken as big of a deal as it should be. And I think, yeah, that those negative, to respond to your, yes, those negative ideas are kind of very prevalent in today's society. And education is the best way to change that. And starting to have these kind of conversations is really important to, opening up these broader issues and kind of making them kind of a more local topic. Um, so a quote that I want to use is a Gandhi quote is be the change that you want to see. And I think that without knowing first, like what the issues are, you can't make that change that you want to see. And just by educating people, my university just opened up a brand new major called the environmental humanities major, which is kind of just in general talking about, climate and ways to in the future to help us as a society move forward in a more sustainable manner. And I think stuff like that's really important to just helping us as a generation move forward.
Certainly good to hear that that's what's been introduced, although one would have maybe hoped this existed, had been introduced somewhat earlier, but there now. And Kaina.
Yeah, I just want to answer Cal's question first. I think the way to get multinational corporations to, really own up to what they've done and to hold them accountable for it, where we need to start is data, raw data, not manipulated data, real raw data. Things that would actually help us understand the severity of the situation, understand where we need to start. I think that's how we should begin that. And that also brings us to the entire concept of climate justice. It basically argues that issues and, movements that were started out in the West are having more severe impacts in the East. And that is something that I think we should really look at, because in the same way that you would look at multinationals, you also need to look at countries and, governments, hold them accountable. Something that I found shocking, not exactly shocking, but this is something that I would like people to know, is architecture of different places. I think that plays a really important role if you're looking at it in a very sustainable manner. For example, you take India. India is a very tropical environment, very humid, very hot most of the year. But all of our buildings are big glass buildings. They're giant, like, made entirely of glass, and all that does is heat up the building. And then in turn to, be able to deal with the heat, we end up blasting the AC, which is just entirely unsustainable. Instead, we need to focus on area-specific designs, not just architecture, but also landscape designs. Really, utilize everything that we have around us while still being sustainable.
Very good. I like that. And has there been anything that you found shocking or surprising, or is that in that same area with the way architecture has been performed, created without maybe thinking carefully about the impact?
Um, I don't think so. I don't think I have particularly found anything that's shocking, but I will let you know if I do.
Got it. In fact, kind of, then I'll stay with you for the next question, which is you've kind of referenced what you had with the water issues in Palm Springs. We had extreme flooding, which blocked freeways, to then having recently record-breaking heat waves. What have you all experienced locally and in your countries on a wider scale as the biggest problems being caused by climate change?
Okay. So right now again in India, it's Diwali. So basically what we have an entire nation bursting crackers, and this is also the time that the harvest usually takes place. So in the more agricultural areas, what they do is once they've cut off the harvest, the remaining part of the plants, they burn it. So it's called stubble burning. They'd burn it, and like they would collect all of that. They'd burn it so they could, start over. But this not only just creates air pollution, this also really deteriorates the soil nutrition and just like the quality of the soil, which is highly unsustainable. And I think that's what we're experiencing right now, unable to look like, past 5 meters of where you're standing. That's how it is. That's how bad the air quality is. So yeah, I think that's mine.
Thank you for that. And is that just out of interest? Is that something that's been widely discussed and addressed, or do you think it needs more attention than it's getting?
The stubble burning, they've tried to address it. They've tried to incorporate, like incentive subsidies to get farmers to use more sustainable methods, like maybe chemicals, but it's not widely adopted yet.
Okay, well, hopefully it will be. Ram.
Well, I think it's been mentioned previously. I'm based in California, so obviously fires have been an extreme issue. I really resonated with what was said earlier. My grandmother also had a farm in Northern California near Santa Rosa that was deeply affected by the fires. But something that is also very pressing on the West Coast, particularly in California, is this shortage of water, where we will eventually be looking at our own day zero. I also spent plenty of time in Arizona, where in the United States, it is the first place to establish a Department of Heat just to deal with rising temperatures. Year in, year out, we're seeing new records being broken. There was a month-long period in Phoenix this past summer where the temperature didn't dip. It was hitting these highs pretty much every day for a month straight. And a lot of folks who were able to leave the state did, but many more were unable to, and just were unable to go outside for more than a few hours at a time. That was a little surreal to see, and yet we're also still seeing this very odd shift where people are moving out to locations like this. So I think it's incredibly important, especially for those folks, to understand, what is happening on a local level, and also that this is playing out all over the world.
Yes, thank you. I think next, Jay. Oh, sorry, no, actually, just I'm trying to keep you generally in the same order. Cal, I think it would be next.
Yeah, so I resonate with what people here have said about the wildfires. That experience was it was life-changing, I'm gonna be frank with you, in terms of having to leave our house and you know, deal with the air quality and just, have our life change for those couple of days, weeks. I think it was like a week or two when we had to be out of our house. between both in Northern California, because we're originally from Pleasanton, we had to deal with wildfires there, and then we moved to SoCal, and then we dealt with wildfires here, right? So that's something that's definitely been very, very impactful. But in terms of water shortages, I think this is something we got to talk about more in the US. This summer, I was in Bangalore to visit some family, and it's crazy out there. And not only is it a question of like, there's not enough groundwater to actively sustain the city, but it's become a political issue between Bangalore and or Karnataka as a whole and Tamil Nadu, right? In terms of even getting that water there. And I think it's a very, very sober warning of what we're in for if we don't make this change and make it quickly.
Thank you. Jay.
Yeah, so I also resonate with the fires, having known a lot of people who lost their homes and are still honestly recovering from that, just is kind of amazing and it's really scary. And as a second thing, yeah, the heat waves are kind of getting really out of hand at a local level. This past this past fall, we had record temperatures into October, and it was kind of just crazy seeing that as a firsthand scale of kind of how the climate's changing. And it is important that we look at how we're addressing it and how we're letting people know about it. What's ironic is that most young people don't actually know about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and it's important that we educate people on those things so that we can kind of move forward on this.
Absolutely. And in California, it has been quite surreal going from the long years of droughts. Then we had in 22, 23, so much rain, extreme rain. Then we end up with the heat waves. It's the swings that we're seeing and so rapidly. It is certainly concerning and for people to not be able to recognize that big changes are happening all around us, all across the US, all across the world. It's striking. But anyway, that's why we're here. Kinda. Oh, Eura. My apologies. Let me jump to Eura next.
Sure. So I think one of the issues that is not being addressed is, I mean, everybody knows about pollution, everybody knows about climate change, but what about biodiversity loss? This is what actually the whole thing is about. That climate change is actually influencing biodiversity loss, and if we look into the evolution, us as a species, as the Homo sapiens as a species, one of the key success factors is being diverse. So diversity actually helped us to survive as a species, and addressing those issues is also very, very important. And sometimes we might not feel that loss in terms of local terms, but globally, it is very alarming. And us as young activists, we have to often emphasize the interconnectedness of ecosystems and human well-being. I mean, we are dependent on ecosystems, and the well-being of ecosystem is highly dependent on biodiversity. And this loss of habitats of both plants and animals is very alarming. And this is one of the issues we have to also address and not ignore. Because sometimes the spotlight is always on the pollution and climate change, but biodiversity loss is actually a bigger issue because it is the basis of everything else.
Right, absolutely. We already started with you, so I'm going to take you on to the next question, which is and it's been touched upon already in the conversation with the panel, but the energy and commitment of students sort of for important causes throughout history has been seen to impact societies on a major scale. Do you think right now student communities are doing enough with climate change, and what can be done to motivate more action?
No, I do not think that student communities are doing enough. I don't think enough student communities are doing enough. I think it's a very small number that actually care about what's happening. More than that, it's a smaller number that actually knows how to deal with what is happening. If student communities were doing enough, I'm sorry, but we'd have a much bigger panel and we'd have a lot more voices. We'd have a lot more people who'd, be doing it. So I think to begin with, how do we start? How do we drive a change? I think, as we all talked about it, it's our personal experiences that got us here. I do not think it is something you can enforce upon somebody. It is something that has to come from within. You can only inform them, but you cannot get them to start doing things. So, yeah.
Do you think that starts at home or in schools at a younger age?
At home, it has to start at home.
At home. So maybe we need programs geared towards parents to raise their children with maybe more knowledge and insight. Is that something that you think would have helped?
I don't think being able to enforce parents to take up programs would be very viable, but honestly, it's a responsibility that parents should have in the first place. It is one that should be instilled upon them in their education. But since we're already here, there are many people out there who have no idea what's happening. I think, yeah, we're gonna have to start at earlier stages.
Got it. Thank you. Ram.
Yeah, I think, more absolutely can be done for young people, especially as we begin to tackle that apathy and get into real solutions. But for existing groups, and especially for a lot of the folks in this room, I think the passion is certainly there to tackle the problem, but perhaps more can be done for older generations and universities themselves to resource students to tackle the complexity of the problem and really to deal with the systems that we're inheriting that have brought us to this point. I think governance is something that Cal brought up. I think that's crucial for young people to be involved in, despite, feeling like those systems are in part why we ended up in the situation that we're in. I think that there needs to be certainly continued direct activism in the form of, marches and all the amazing work that's being done. But what I'd really like to see is more young people getting involved on the institutional level and trying to actually enact systemic change that way.
What do you think would help motivate that? There's so many things that are pulling people in different directions, particularly with their attention, their time.
Absolutely, and I think this is where the arts and culture realm can really step in and begin to inspire those kinds of complex solutions. I think something that kind of very briefly touched on, but that's really important to address, is that we can't turn off all of these systems tomorrow without radical, devastating impacts to a lot of emerging markets and the global center. I think that there is an infinite amount of complexity to the issue that really can only be tackled through these systems and institutions. And I think the more young people that come to the realization that we are going to need to work with governments and massive organizations that perhaps were a part of the problem, the more we can actually begin to instill real change. Yeah.
Thank you. Cal.
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of what Ram said, and I do want to kind of bring it back to that institutional question that we were talking about briefly. And I think that is a very fundamental part of the solution. We need to incentivize these multinational corporations, either with the carrot or the stick, to basically become more climate friendly. We need to do that in terms of policy. We need to do that in terms of government incentives. And I think we've seen with this administration a willingness to work with these multinational corporations and start making this change. Now, in terms of what can young people do, because I want to end this off on a high note. I completely agree with Ram that we need to attack this from a policy perspective. We need young people to get into office and to start making these changes. But not only do we need to do that, we need young people to participate in the arts and go ahead and basically make feature films and make productions that bring attention to this issue. And for that, I salute you, Ram. You're doing God's work on that. But I also believe that we need to talk about the technical. We need people who are willing to get to work, buckle up, and come up with these innovative solutions that make it more affordable to be green, that give people information, and to really attack this problem on every level. And I think that's what it is. We need to bring climate into every facet of our life, whether it's individual, whether it is these multinational corporations, whether we're talking about arts, whether we're talking about policy, whether we're talking about technical. We cannot hyper-focus on simply one of these areas and expect the problem to go away. Like Ram said, this is an infinitely complex problem, but that means there are infinite solutions, and we should be attacking them at every single level.
Love the passion. Euro.
This was actually very motivating, and but actually, when it comes to doing something, I'll just compare this with my fellow students, with my friends. I mean, I would just rather care about my GPA rather than climate change. Why should I care about climate change? I think the emphasis has to shift. I mean, this is immensely motivating just to make the change, but in reality, the society is if we do it comes from an educational system. So if the emphasis is on if you don't have a GPA, you're not going to get to the university, you're not going to get to the master's program, and so on and so on. If the emphasis is on just the numbers, how do we expect for young people to be active about climate change or try to make a change if the only emphasis is on those numbers? And those numbers limit that we try to put them in a box. Those young minds, we put them in a box and say, okay, get this, get that, and this is it. But instead, what we have to do is to make sure that those numbers do not mean anything. And when that comes, I think that would be a part when a huge number of young people will start to actually care. Because I mean, if this society is just all about numbers and measuring people, limiting them, how do we expect that young people are passionate? So I think the problem here is much more in the core rather than just. It would make sense in a very short term, but we have to be consistent. In order to be consistent, the demand has to be that we do make sure that young people understand that they're not limited and they're not in a box.
Thank you, Euro. Jay?
Yeah, so going off of Veer's point, in the short term, something that is a very big problem in our generation is that fast fashion scene. And what we need to do as a generation is kind of learn how to be more sustainable and reuse and, kind of shift our kind of perspective from more of a consumerism side to more of, just kind of the secondhand goods market. Like we can reuse things. We don't have to keep buying things every season. And it's important as a generation that we kind of come to that realization. And without education, it's kind of hard to. But um, as kind of a student body, we have the idea, but we just don't have, the practices in place to be sustainable yet.
Thank you, Jay. And Kaina?
I think we started with me, if I'm not wrong.
Oh, sorry. And we did. So in
Yeah.
fact, what I'm going to do then with this question is we're coming up to the end of the panel. So I was originally going to ask for 3 wishes that you could all make, but I think we might be run out of time if we go that way. So you all get to have 1 climate change wish. If you could have anything enacted, which would have to be implemented by a government institution or people's behavior, what would be your number 1 wish that you would see implemented in the world?
I think I'm gonna need a minute. I think you
Okay,
should start with someone else.
Is there anyone that has their number 1 climate change wish? Ram?
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Tayfun, and you, Mr. Singh, for having us on. I think I'll close with this. My one wish, given the current global landscape, one of increasing severance, nationalism, xenophobia, and underrepresentation in spite of these increasingly transnational issues. To me, it's never been more important to tell stories that embrace the challenges of a more open and diverse global village. I consider it crucial now for the world to answer this fundamental question of whether we are all collectively better off tackling climate change, biodiversity, and sustainability, whether we're better off together or apart. So my one wish would be for people to really embrace a global approach to all of these issues, to really recognize that there are allies all over the world, and begin to form the kind of coalition that we'll need that is, as Cal said, extremely complex and multifaceted to embrace all of those solutions collectively and together.
So a wish for a coalition, a global coalition to
Global
form.
coalition.
Love it. Does someone have their wish ready?
Sure, I'll jump in. I think that if I could wish for anything to happen right now, it would be for just us as a generation to kind of come to that realization that we don't need, like, we can be sustainable as kind of a whole, and we can shift the goal is to shift our perspective from, kind of a consumerism thing to more of a sustainability mindset.
Great.
And just to add one more wish, I would really wish that just to stay curious. I mean, just be curious and never try to lose that spark, that inner kid we have. I'd wish to never lose it, and always be curious and ask questions. I think that's the key.
Love it. Thank you, Yura. Kaina or Jay? No, sorry, Jay, you've already given yours. Cal or Kaina?
Okay, I think I'd wish for like all young people across the world to really have that spark ignited in them, to care about it, to try to make a difference. I think that would be my wish.
Ignite that spark earlier in life. Thank you. And Cal, I think that leaves you as the last one.
Sure does. So before I get into my response, I just want to thank Mr. Anand Singh and Ms. Annika Panpel for having me on this panel. It's been an incredible conversation talking with you. Of course, Mr. King, I want to thank you as well. You've been an incredible moderator, and I've really enjoyed every minute of this discussion. In terms of my wish, I think it is quite parallel to what Jay said. I think it really is a question of awareness. And I wish that there was less misinformation and people were truly aware of the gravity of this issue. Because I think this is kind of going off of something that kind of said earlier in the debate. If everyone knew the gravity of this issue and they knew what we were up against, and it wasn't spun by the media and made to look less problematic than it truly is, I don't think we'd have this issue. I truly believe that this generational divide and this unwillingness to work with one another spurns or kind of comes from this lack of information and this kind of twisting of information. So I guess it kind of comes down to, I wish everyone had the data in front of them, and I wish everyone read the data, because then we would not be looking at one policy initiative that would pass. Basically, all of them would pass, right? Because we'd be judging them based off of the data and the facts, not off some spun media narrative that is different to each person. Thank you so much.
And if I could add to that wish that the data would then be believed by everyone, that the data is accurate.
I'm right there with you, but yeah.
But thank you all so much. Your contribution to this was fantastic. Your passion is so clear, your ideas, your creativity. I've loved hearing about it all. Thank you very much once again. And I'll hand it back over to Annika and Anand.
Thank you.
Thank you.